All right. So here is my tail 01. This was my file with it, just the key poses. And you can see that I added a ground plane and I added a little pile of snow that displaces as he hits the snow. So, but I'm not going to focus on that right now. I want to focus on my character. So I go to my layers and I say select objects, and nothing's. Oh, you can also see that I added a little. It looks more like a squirrel to me from this scale, so I scaled it down, but it's just the beaver. But I'm going to turn him off. Well, anyways, I'm not going to worry about him right now. You don't have to add another character. If you're having enough trouble with just getting down the animation for one character, don't bother bringing in another character. I just, I really want to tell a story, so this little guy is going to help me tell my story, but that's not necessary. All right, so just going pose to pose. I don't know if you remember the last version of this, but I tilted his head a little bit more to the right to make him look like he's a little bit more curious. It's more obvious from the perspective view, but anyways, so he's tilted a little bit more to the right. I had his tail start out kind of just limp, and then he goes into his anticipated squash, and he jumps up in the air. He splats, and the tail is already kind of acting like a coil, just kind of bouncing on itself. And then it, kind of just relaxes, and you can see from here to here, I kind of come out of that squash, and then he pops up with a little character, a little squirrel in his mouth, and the squirrel gets away quickly, and then he gets sad. So if I just hit play, and hopefully it's not, hopefully the bandwidth is okay so that you guys can see every frame, because there's only 8 frames. But is it a pretty clear story? Is there anything that's maybe confusing about this?
It's pretty straightforward. I like the speed at which the squirrel leaves.
Yeah, I really wanted it to feel like he's zipping away. All right, so that's the first pass. Those are my keys. And I can still move stuff around in timing, but I'm gonna go to my next file, which has oops, did I close it? No, I didn't. Oh, I think I did. All right, anyways, I'm gonna open up my other file that has my breakdowns. And one thing I'd recommend is adding like a BD for breakdown, SP for spline, that kind of thing, just so it's clear for you as you're editing, that you don't accidentally save over the wrong file or whatever. Okay, so I don't know why, but I have to set up my layouts again. So if you bear with me for just a second. Panels, panel, graph editor. I'm gonna switch this to my camera, my perspective, and this one to my camera. Okay. And then on my camera view, I don't want to see anything but my, I don't want to see my NURBS curves, and I don't want to see my camera, just my props and my characters. Over here, that's fine. Okay, so this is my, oh, let's see, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, these are my keys and breakdowns. So you can see here's my first breakdown. I go to the stretch. So this is what I keep stressing over and over. The character is squashing, and then he's stretching, and he's still in contact with the ground before he leaves the ground. And now he's up in the air. And then he dives in. So this is also a new breakdown pose. So this is the contact just before the squash. and then he squashes, and then the tail kind of just relaxes, falls around. And I needed a new frame to kind of get him up out of the snow. So he's kind of like going backwards from in the snow. And then he pops up with the squirrel or whatever, ground squirrel. He relaxes down. And through all of this, if you watch the tail, I'm really trying to focus on getting the tail to overlap. So it's, of course, we have to have the feeling of weight and good arcs and good squash and stretch. Those are all part of this assignment, but really make sure it's that you're adding overlapping action. That's the whole point of this assignment, is to get the tail overlapping. So it pops up. And you can see I have him settle down a little bit too. He comes up and then he kind of relaxes down, the tail relaxes, and then the squirrel zips away. And I use the stretch to kind of have him stand more alert, like he's surprised. And then he kind of sulks. But so I squash him down again, and then I bring him up just a little bit. So if I just play this for you. So especially watch the tail. You can see that it's just kind of flopping around for the most part. I could add a couple of places, maybe at the beginning where maybe it has more secondary action, but this isn't a secondary action assignment, just more for my story. If I wanted to have the tail like wagging back and forth a little bit, kind of more like a cat tail, I could do that just to make it more entertaining. But the main thing I want to make sure that I get in is that the tail is overlapping. How does that look compared to the first one? Is that better? Is it feeling better?
Yeah,
So
it
the one
looks
thing,
smoother.
it looks better. Yeah, so the more frames you add, the more layers of detail you add to your poses, it's going to just look better and better. And like I said before, you could do this all the way through 24 frames a second, just in steps, adding enough frames so that the motion is just really smooth. But like I also said, you don't want to have to do that because that's a lot more work than it has to be. The graph editor has all these spline tools that are going to help you get there much faster than having to figure out, all these individual frames. So I'm gonna save this again, save scene as, and I'm gonna say that I'm happy with this. I could probably still work a little bit on the timing, but for the most part, my poses are there. So I'm gonna version this up to SP. And I ended up using the 01, 02, 03 for the different classes that I'm actually teaching. So 01 is for your class, 02 is for the afternoon class, and then 03 is for the substitute teaching that I've been doing. So, but I can keep it. These are just naming conventions that help me keep my my classes straight. All right, so there's my spline 01, save as. Okay, so the main thing that I wanted to really make sure that I get down really nicely is the arc and the jump. So I'm going to go to the main control, and let's say I'm just going to look at the translate Y. So he goes from here to here. At the top, just like with the ball bounce, I want that to be a flat tangent. So I'm going to flatten that one. This one, he's leaving, he's popping off of the ground. So I'm going to turn this one into a linear tangent. And I'm not worried. It's not right. It doesn't look right because it's not right in the Z axis. He's going straight up and then he's going over and then he's coming down. I'm not too worried about that right now. I know it's going to look weird at first, but I just really want to focus on the Y axis right now. So that's where he hits the ground, or his nose just touches the ground because that's his contact position. And then he splats in there. So I'm gonna, and let's see, I think it's just a single frame. Yeah, you can get away with a lot of stuff if you're just animating a single frame change. So I'm gonna take this one and turn it into a linear tangent also. Oh, sorry, not that one. I'm gonna do that. This one. There you go. In fact, I don't really like the way that looks. I'm actually going to turn it into a spline tangent and see if that looks a little bit better. And if it's too distracting, and this is really distracting, the z-axis, because it looks so wrong, I'm going to go ahead and work on that, even though I said I was going to focus more on the y-axis. So the main thing that we should see here from his leaving at frame 20, what is that, 26, to his contact at whatever that is. Gosh, I can't see. I think it's 36. This should be a straight line. So I'm actually going to delete what I have at 31. And I'm going to turn these guys into a linear tangents and see if that makes it better. So already that feels a lot better. You can actually see the arc, and that feels so much better. And I would really caution you about using the spline tangent. You really want to be very particular about selecting your controls and using the spline tool or any of these, except for the step tangent. I mean, everything's in stepped right now. But when you're using the flat tangent or the linear tangent or the spline tangent, you want to be more selective about it. You don't want to just select a whole bunch of stuff and then just turn it all spline. If you do that, your animation is going to look very, it's going to look more like student work than professional work, because you're going to get a lot of places where it floats through where it should be contacting the ground, or you're going to change the timing when, don't let the computer just take over your spline tools. You have to maintain control of your spline tools. So I'm going to work on the squash and stretch now. So right now I have it just a single frame, and I think I want to keep it that way because I want it to pop. If I select this and hit spline tangent, he's stretching way too early. And that makes me realize that I didn't key my squash and stretch tool at the top on that position. So I'm going to go back to my all button and say select objects. And I'm going to take a closer look. All right, I'm just going to go a frame early. So 25, I want to maintain this squash. So I'm going to hit S. And then at 26 is where I want to stretch it. So I'm going to select my squash and stretch and turn that into a linear. So now I'm holding that squash all the way through 25, and then at 26 it changes. And what I could do is, well, no, I want to, this is a stretch pose, so I want there to be a drastic change there. But here, I could say these are spline tangents. In fact, this, it may not, and this is, again, going back to the ball assignment, as the ball is leaving, his head is just a big ball. Squash, stretch, and as that's getting to the crest of the arc, it's slowly going back into its original shape. And maybe I actually delete this for a second. Oh, before I do that, let me go to this pose. So I don't like how it dips before. That's going to change the shapes at frame 35. I'm actually going to flat tangent that. And you can see that that's starting to change the shape of my curve in here. I'm going to delete this frame for a second and then rekey it. And let's see if that makes it cleaner. That's a little bit better. You can also, I don't know, you should be able to grab these handles. Yeah, there you go. And you can adjust it. For some reason last year when I was teaching this, I could not, for the life of me, it wasn't working, but now it's working. So, and maybe I'll even flat tangent this just to see what it looks like. I'm just going to flat tangent this stretch. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but from the stretch to the crest, it's a nice gradual return to the original shape. And then from the original shape, I'll just put 0, bring it back to its original shape. To the contact position, it's stretching slowly. And you can see the rotation. The next thing I want to fix is the rotation on the main control. So I'm going to grab the main control now. And you can see I'm just working on the arc, the jump, and I'm not worried about anything else right now. I just want to get this nice and clean. So I want to work on the rotate X, I believe. Yeah. And I think for the most part, I can just turn this into a spline tangent. And maybe this one too. And this one, I'm thinking I probably want this one to be a flat tangent. Another thing to be careful about, it's really easy for me to spend too much time in the graph editor trying to make the graph look nice and beautiful. What really matters isn't so much how beautiful the curves are looking in the graph editor. What's more important is how beautiful your animation is looking. I know that some of these tools are going to help me get there, but sometimes I spend too much time trying to clean it up and make it look really nice when I need to be focusing more on how what I do in here affects the animation. And I think I might even just get rid of this frame at 26. I remember that I added that position because let me actually see. When he's stretching at 26, he stretches. And I noticed in my blocking that when he stretched, his body was more vertical, which meant his eyes were not locked onto his target. He was looking straight ahead instead of kind of down at the snow where he was aiming. So if I delete this, that may change that. Let me just see. Yeah, you can see it did change it a little bit. Maybe I'll keep it after all. So even though I'm tempted to delete that, that had a purpose, so I don't want to delete that. Over here at the top, he's still, in fact, throughout that, from 26 to 31, you can see that his focus is always on that same position. If I were to turn off my, well, I don't have a layer for this in this file, but hold on just a second. Let's see, I'm going to grab the main control again, and I'm just focusing on rotate X. So I'm trying to keep his eyes on the target. That's working pretty good. Translate Z. Yeah. All right, so that's working pretty good. I like the arc. The next thing I want to work on is a tail. And for the most part, I could probably work with these together, but I'm actually gonna just start with the the base control of the tail and make sure that's in good shape for this jump. So from the squash up here, so I'm focusing on the rotate X to start with. Let's see, is that right? Yeah, no, actually, yeah, rotate X, that's right. So I'm gonna start with and the tail, because it's dragging, I'm gonna probably be a little bit more liberal with the spline tangent on this one, because I want it to feel like it's the tail can be floating a little bit more. It for the most part will be floating and dragging more than his head will. And maybe I'll even adjust this a tad bit more so it's a little bit more round. In fact, you know what I'm realizing? These two poses from 26 to 31. The other thing that I should do, I really should open up my my video reference and watch, just double checking stuff. But I remember that the tail through this part of the anime, through the video, the documentary, it's actually not posed like that. It's more posed like this. So maybe I need to add another frame in just for. So I'm already through my breakdowns, and maybe this would be an in-between that's going to help me get to my my spline a little bit better. Maybe I'll straighten this out, or yeah, that's more what I'm looking for. So it's the tail is more gradually it's slowly going down. If you guys remember from the video, when he starts to jump, the tail is like 90 degrees to his body. It's like he's using the tail to help himself balance. And then after that, as his body is going up, the tail is slowly coming down. And it's mostly, I'm talking about the base. The base of the tail does have some secondary action independent of the body, but the rest of the tail, the other half of the tail is just kind of flopping around. And this, it looks kind of weird because I'm focusing more on the base, and we're seeing most of the movement happening in the rest of the tail. So I'll go through and fix that, but I want to get the base fixed first. So yeah, I'll keep this. I'll turn this into a flat tangent so that when he's falling down, it's just coming out of that arc. And then this is going to be a pretty abrupt, because he's kind of impacting the snow pretty hard. There will be a little bit of a pop there. And I mean, that actually works. I don't have to change that, but just maybe my OCD wants me to make it look better. So maybe from one frame, you don't really see any difference. So that's not a big deal. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next joint. And I'm working on the rotate X. So actually, while I'm working, do you guys have any questions? All right, so I'm pretty much going to do the same thing going through the next joint. So from 25 to 26 is anticipation. No, let's see. Actually, this is now wrong. I kind of messed up my tail. From at 26. I found a new pose for it. I need to go back to frame. Yeah, this is at 28. So I actually need, I posed the rotate X at 28. I need to find new poses for all the tail joints at 28. You can see that I don't have anything keyed there. So I'm gonna go ahead and key those and then make changes so that it feels a little bit better at 28. And that's gonna change what it looks like at 26 also. But I'm gonna use 28 to guide what I end up doing at 26. So I'm gonna maybe give it a little bit more arc on that one and a little bit less on these. I'm actually going to rotate this down a little bit more. Maybe I'll straighten these out a little bit too. Maybe they're a little bit too high. And then this one by itself. Okay, so now with those changes made, what I really like about the graph editor is it gives you the ability to just constantly experiment and make changes and play. So I've been working pose to pose, and now I'm working between the poses, trying to figure things out. So I think I'm actually going to delete what I have at 26 and use what I have at 28 to influence 26. Okay, so that's 25. That's 26. I can see that I'm missing a key here at 28, so I'm going to hit S again. And I'm going to try something a little different. And if you guys watch the working in step mode video, where I show the squirrel jumping and all that, I use the spline tools to help me find a new in-between. So I'm going to actually turn, so I have all my tail controls selected, and I'm going to turn all of my keys at 25 for the tail. I'm going to turn them into spline for a second, and I'm going to see what it gives me. I'm looking for a better pose. In fact, if I really wanted more poses, I'm remembering 25 because that's where the body's keyed. I'm actually going to drag it back earlier just to give me more frames to work with. Maybe that actually looks pretty good, this new 25. So I'm going to key it there. And I'm just going to kind of drag it forward a little bit. And I need to remember that this 22 was a 25. So I'm repositioning that to where it was. So it actually changes at 25 instead of where it was. And then let's see if I spline this. That actually feels pretty good for me. I like the way it's feeling. And I could bring it, like I said, I could bring up the fox video and we could watch that and see that that's what the fox's tail would be doing. Okay, so I'm going to go to the rest of the, I'm going to go back to this, the second joint on the tail. And it pops right there because I haven't splined it. So I'm going to go to the spline tool. And then maybe the next joint. This one probably needs to be a flat tangent. There's a lot more change on that. And then up here, I'll hit spline flat again. Yeah, and then the last joint, rotate X, and I'll spline this one. And then I'm going to flat tangent this one. And maybe I'll spline that one. Okay, so I'm just gonna, I don't want to watch the whole video because, I mean the whole 120 frames because I'm just focusing on the arc. So I'm gonna start it at 20. So I'm just gonna drag this little square to frame 20. And then it ends at frame, I'll end it at 40. So we're just gonna watch 20 frames of animation. So I hit play. In fact, I'm gonna make it bigger for you guys. Hopefully that'll make it a little bit better for you. And you can see my camera. I need to adjust my camera. So I unlocked it, and I'm gonna go to the top of the crest. And I wanna see the whole movement through there. So I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit, and then I'm gonna relock it and replay it. So how does the arc feel to you guys? Does anything stand out as not, because I want at certain places, I want the animation to pop when he's jumping off the ground through the air. I want it to feel nice and fluid. And then when he hits the ground, I want it to pop also. So is that working pretty well, do you guys think? What are your thoughts?
I think it's pretty smooth. I like the art. I don't think it like necessarily pops too much. Like definitely like on the landing, but I don't know if like you want to make it pop more, but I think it looks
Mhm.
great.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I could, and maybe because I'm not showing enough frames. Maybe if I started sooner, I don't know. Yeah, but I could probably maybe have it pop more at the beginning or something. So I can work on that. The other thing is watching the tail through this movement. I hope you guys can see the overlapping action that's happening, especially at the end of the tail. It's delayed. It kind of whips a little bit, and it's going to whip more as it collides, as he collides into the ground. I just haven't gotten to those frames yet, but yeah. So that's essentially how I would work through this entire process of splining. I'm not selecting everything and just putting the spline tool on it. It's an easy way to spline your animation, but it's a very sloppy way. You don't have nearly the control that you need to maintain for good animation. So make sure you don't get into that habit, because that's like I said before, that really is what with 3D animation, that's the probably the main difference between professional work and student work. Is professionals are very careful about using the spline tools, and students just kind of select everything and hit spline, and it just looks floaty and swimmy, as opposed to very selectively controlling it. And I'm not going to go through the whole animation, splining the whole thing, but I just want to show you guys the tools that I use. So just a review, this first one, spline tangent, that's going to give you arcs that are, let me pick a different, yeah, so that's going to give you arcs that are more like this. And then the flat tangent right here, that makes, obviously it's flat. I'm going to use a linear tangent when I want something to pop. So I think I used it on the, oh, I think I used it on the, yeah, the control for the squash and stretch. I want it popping from this pose up here, so it's not gonna gradually change. And I'll just show you the difference again. So if this was blind, well, and I don't know, it may be such a small difference that you won't notice it, because there's only a single frame between those. But if this was splined instead of flat, or instead of stepped, you can see there's all kinds of movement in there. And maybe I want that. It's actually causing him to squash more. So maybe that's a good thing. So it's a lot of it is just playing with your tools and understanding what they do, maybe learning as you experiment. And like I also showed you with I don't remember which tool, I think it was a tail. I was trying to find a new pose. You can use the spline tools to find a better pose than you have by maybe dragging your pose a little bit earlier, and then you have several frames to choose from with the spline tool turned on. But it's just more a matter of playing with it and seeing what works best for you, or what gives you the movement and the pose that you're looking for. And then I talked about linear tangent, flat tangent, step. Some of the stuff can stay in stepped. If you want it to pop, like I probably could have just kept this in stepped, and you really wouldn't notice a difference between that and what I did with the spline, or the flat tangent, or the the linear tangent. It doesn't really, with a single frame, that's not enough time to see the difference. But yeah, do you guys have any questions of my working process, or what you guys, Saja, do you have any recommendations? Working with the spline tools?
Honestly, something I would do is don't be afraid to like save new versions and just mess with it. If
Mhm.
you want to like keep your one version clean, do like a save as a new file if you want to move poses around, so that way you don't
Yeah.
get so far into things that you're like, ah, I can't go back now. Now
Yeah,
I'm
that's
stuck with this.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a really good suggestion. That just gives you the freedom to explore and experiment without fear of losing your work. So yeah, I really like that suggestion. Thank you. All right, guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video here. But yeah, this is essentially, I'll post this today so you guys can kind of watch my process. And then we'll just see how you guys are working on your, I'm gonna check out your blocking in a second. So I'm gonna stop the video. Where's this? Where is the record button? Oh, here it is.